you can actually learn how to play the piano by visualizing playing the piano, which is an amazing concept. What that means then is that we can use imaginal, nurturing figures to provide the nurturing and care and love and attention to the wounded parts of us that are still there from childhood, that carry the pain of not having been nurtured.
Welcome to Whole by Design, the podcast exploring the human experience with compassion and curiosity. Together, we'll uncover powerful internal resources and tools to help you embrace clarity, joy, and your full potential, because you are whole by design. Hi, everyone. On this week's episode, we will be diving into the power of the brain. And I'm going to encourage you to stay until the end when we're going to hear about the 3 best tips for being an empowered consumer when it comes to potentially engaging with and taking advantage of the power of more advanced brain-based work. Today, I'd like to welcome Tracy Ryan Kidd, who is an amazing leader in the world of EMDR. Yes, we're going to get into that. It's a type of brain-based therapy and a whole bunch of other cool stuff that leaves you empowered. But she is the owner and founder of Virginia Family Counseling. She is a leader and a trainer, a supervisor, a consultant. She's had a long, illustrious career. They offer not only individual work, but also couples and family work. Her stuff and the people that work for her are really talented. And before we jump in, don't forget to check out our website, www.vivapartnership.com, for free and low-cost resources that can change your life. Thanks so much for joining us, Tracy.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Julie. I so appreciate it. And I love that. I love the topic of your podcast. You know,
Whole by
that
Design.
whole by design. That's so perfect.
Thank
Right.
you. And that's why
That's
you're
right.
our perfect guest. Not only are
Oh.
you know, a more than 3-decade-long expert in working with not only trauma, but also these exciting, more innovative, results-based, brain-based types
Right.
of therapeutic approaches. But I know philosophically that you really understand, not only from your training, but from your work in the trenches, of how incredibly brilliant our bodies, our brains are, and our ability to adapt and overcome life's stumbling blocks.
Yeah, it is so true. I think that was the thing that was just so exciting when I first discovered EMDR, is that the healing comes up from within the person's, mind, body, soul. It's not directed by the therapist. It's not that the therapist, in the old methods of therapy where the therapist is, just having you talk about what your experiences were and giving you advice and telling you what to do or telling you how to change your thoughts. It's none of that. It's that the therapist gets to have the wonderful honor of following the brain of the client, and the way that the brain is naturally made to heal. And so the way that it works is that
Well, can I interrupt you just one
please,
sec, Tracy? I'll
please.
dial it back just a little bit
Yeah,
for the listener.
great.
What does EMDR stand for?
Ah, right. That's right. That would be the place to start, right?
But I know you're
So
on a roll. We're going to get into some good stuff
yeah,
today.
yeah. Okay, good. Um, it's kind of a mouthful. It's eye movement desensitization and reprocessing.
Woo!
And yeah, there's, for no good reason does it need to have that long of a name. But basically, what we do is we use eye movement or other forms of like tapping or sounds to kickstart what the brain naturally does in our rapid eye movement sleep state, which is what happens when we dream. And we believe that what's happening there is that the brain is taking all of the stimuli from the day, all of the things that happened, how you felt about it, what you thought about it, and processing and digesting and integrating that information between the hemispheres of the brain, sort of integrating it with everything else that you know about yourself, so that it can make sense of the information, um, and basically you feel better the next day. So if, for example, you go to bed worried about something, and I'm sure you've heard the expression, well, sleep on it, see how you feel in the morning. And a
Yes.
lot of times you do feel better. And
Yes.
that's because your brain's been working on it behind the scenes in your rapid eye movement sleep, moving your eyes back and forth to collect and integrate information from your right hemisphere to your left hemisphere and back again. But when a trauma occurs or traumatic events, because of all the adrenaline and cortisol that gets released, sometimes it gets stuck and the brain can't process it as it normally would. And so that's why people have symptoms of post-traumatic stress, is because it gets stuck in its original form in the brain and the nervous system, and it keeps replaying to try to heal, but it needs more help to get going. And that's why we introduce the eye movement that allows the brain to go back and forth between the hemispheres to integrate and consolidate and heal that trauma that occurred. So it's
Let
really
me,
just
let me,
using what the brain already does. Yeah,
I love that. Okay.
yeah,
So
yeah.
beautiful. Our system is
Uh,
full by design
that's right.
without us directing anything.
Right.
At night, we have rapid eye movement, REM sleep.
Hmm.
Everyone knows about that. And
That's
it's
right.
literally designed without our consent, without us
Right.
driving the bus. It's already working to help us recover.
Yeah,
We are better
that's right.
rested. We can integrate
That's
hard
right.
stuff.
Yeah,
That's very super cool. And you're
yeah.
saying that EMDR uses this principle in a
Right.
more targeted way to
Hmm.
actually remove things that have been stuck. So
Yeah,
cool. It's like a super
that's
deep
right.
cleaning process.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great way of describing it. That's right.
I love it.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
I know what I know what listeners are interested in is
Hmm.
how do I leverage, right, what my body already has in
Hmm.
order to get results or to get things to change or to have
That's
symptoms
right.
go away or to feel good. So
Hmm.
tell me a little bit more about your work
Yeah.
kind of stuff.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, and just to speak to that for a minute, a lot of times people use natural bilateral stimulation just by taking a walk. So if you think about, executives will say all the time, if I get stuck on a problem and I've spent 5 minutes working on it and I can't think of something or I get blocked, I go for a walk. And part of what's happening there is that while you're walking, you're using bilateral stimulation, meaning, left, right, left, right, left, right. And the two hemispheres of your brain are integrating and working on that problem. So people listening to this podcast can know that when you're stuck on something, go for a walk.
I
There
love
are lots of natural ways that you can use what the brain does to process and move through blockages, which is just such an empowering thing to know
totally
without even being in therapy.
and
Yeah,
easy and free.
right. That's right.
I love it. I always
That's
tell
right.
people I have a pyramid and I'm like, hey, if the lowest, cheapest, easiest thing on the pyramid
Right.
fixes what's going on, do that.
Go for it.
Go
Yes,
for it.
exactly, exactly. Yeah, and then I would just say the other way that we tend to use EMDR is also for um, traumatic things that, not only for traumas that occurred, but also for things that did not occur, for example, in childhood that should have occurred, like proper nurturing and protection and attention and love and secure attachment. And so much of the time, that is what is driving folks who come to us, driving some of their relationship issues or problems, their anxiety. So many times, high anxiety in a client is that they never were able, their parents did not develop secure attachment with them. So
No.
they feel insecure, and that drives a lot of their anxiety in terms of not feeling good enough and not feeling good enough in relationships or chasing relationships or any of those kinds of things. And so there is a way to combine this very powerful form of processing with some of the other imaginal ways of using our imagination to actually redo um, some of the things that should have happened for us that didn't happen.
I'm so excited about this part, Tracy.
Uh-huh.
Imagination. So we're putting a bookmark
Yes.
because this is super, super exciting. And of course, for
Yeah.
me, as an
Hmm.
adopted person who has a history that I wish I could
Right.
erase and redraw because it involved a lot of kind of unconscious and unremembered things that impacted my nervous system, the idea
Right.
of the imagination is super
Hmm.
exciting. But what I
Yes.
wanted to just mention is you shared something really important when I think about what's called a trauma-informed approach
Yeah.
to healing, which just means seeing the person and the system with compassion,
Right.
respect, admiration, even for what people
Hmm.
have to do to survive life's
Right.
tumbling blocks and looking at those adaptations. One of the things I always learned was that in terms of stuff that can cause those stuck or blocked things that you mentioned, and that's
Hmm.
not just receptive to just sleeping it away, right?
Right.
It's
Right.
deeper than that, are things that are either, and there's a spectrum, violent, so trauma,
Yeah.
things where someone's
Right.
coming into your space, and on the
That's right.
other end of the continuum is neglect, where you don't
Right.
get what you
That's
need.
right.
I just wanted to kind of put a highlight on what you're
Yes.
saying because there is this
Yes.
whole range, and I've often thought of it like a flower. Like a
Hmm.
flower growing needs sun and rain,
That's right.
soil condition, like all the nurturing,
That's
just as
right.
much as it needs the fence around it to keep predators out and protection.
Exactly. That is so, it's so true. And also that, you know, love and attention as a child is exactly the same as oxygen and food and water. It's
Yeah.
survival.
Yes.
So many times clients will come and they'll say, so I have these issues or problems, but I didn't have trauma in my childhood.
White picket
Um,
fence,
right,
fancy
right.
cars, all the
That's right.
things.
That's right, exactly. And nobody ever hit me, nobody abused me, nobody. But what you find out as you explore, deeper is that they were kind of ignored or they weren't really attended. Or if they were sad or upset, it was, I'll give you something to cry about. Or, so there's a lot of what didn't happen that should have happened that is just as important in terms of a person feeling good about themselves and being able to live, a complete and fulfilling life as much as the bad things that, shouldn't have happened. And so having ways to be able to work on those issues of the neglect or the absence, even when it's wasn't severe, but it was enough to cause the person to feel like, well, I'm not all that important because I don't get very much attention. Nobody really listens to me. Nobody really cares all that much how I feel. So I must not be all that important. And
Mm,
then that has, consequences in terms of the choices that they'll make and how they feel throughout their whole lives.
right. And not
Yeah.
just the choices, but how they interface relationally,
Right.
right?
That's
The
right.
assumptions
That's
that they
right.
might have based on
That's
that.
right. Exactly.
Wow, so this is
Exactly.
really powerful
Yeah.
stuff, right? That you can
Yeah.
change this and you can
That's right.
change that story, not
That's
change
right.
what happened in the past, but the way it's
No.
held in the body.
That's it. That's exactly right. Is that, and we know that you can use your imagination to actually form new neural pathways in the brain that were not there before, which is a very exciting concept.
Okay,
Um,
slow that down. Walk me through
okay.
that. Tell me
Yeah.
what you mean when you say something like that you can
Yeah.
use your imagination to
Right.
form
New
new
neural pathways.
pathways.
Yes. So this comes from, there's been a ton of research, and I want to say the past 20, 25 years on the field of neurobiology, which is basically studying the brain and how does the brain work, and what are these things called neurons, which, are the cells in the brain. And we used to believe that once you got to be, maybe in your 20s, low 20s, that your brain didn't grow anymore. That was it, sort of, you were done. And now we know there's a new concept called neuroplasticity,
So
which basically just says the brain continues to grow new nerve cells and neurons all the way through your entire life, all the way until old age. And so that is so exciting because um, to know that you can create new neural pathways, which means that your brain's going to take you down a different direction than the way it's always gone before. If that was a negative direction, I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough because I didn't receive the nurturing that I should have received. If you, through imagination, use imaginal ways, which we'll talk about in a sec, to provide that nurturing to hurt wounded parts of yourself, you're actually creating new neural pathways that your brain will now start to go down that say, well, I've redone that. I now nurture myself, so I know that I'm important. I know that I'm worthy because I have done this for myself, basically. And so, what the one of the big neurobiological researchers, his name is Dan Siegel. He's got incredible books out there, particularly for how to raise children. Knowing with all this new neurobiological research, um, and he said that the greatest discovery we've made in this century in terms of research on the brain is that imagination is our most neuroplastic agent, meaning using the imagination is what grows those new neurons and neural pathways more than anything else. So that's so exciting because we all have an imagination,
I love,
right?
well, we all have imagination, and
Right,
no one can control the deck of cards you get that you're born
right.
into. No
That's
one
right.
can control bad things happen in this world. And it
That's
can
right.
feel, I know this, like
Yeah.
it can feel like a death sentence. Like, well,
Right.
my
That's it.
childhood
What
really
are you going to
stunk.
do? Right.
So I'm never going to have good relationships. I'm never going to get out of this depression. I'm never going to, whatever, fill in the blank.
That's exactly right.
We know now
Yeah.
that neurobiologically
Right.
things can change
Yes.
anytime in your
Yeah.
30s, in your 50s, in your 70s. It's
That's right.
literally like a get out of jail free card.
It really is. It's just amazing.
It's amazing.
And so your thoughts can control the structure and function of your brain. The way it works is
With
what
the
you
structure and function, not just
yes,
your
not
like
just
what
the right, not just the function, like, feeling better, making, forming new habits. This is one of the ways we form a new habit. If you want to be, walk every day or exercise every day, what you're doing is creating a new neural pathway that makes it easier. It takes about 6 to 8 weeks of doing that. And suddenly it becomes a habit. And it's like, yeah, that's what I do. It's no big deal. So that's what neuroplasticity means, is that when you focus on something, that's where the brain lights up and fires your neurons to go in that direction.
going to share
And
a favorite
then
quote.
yes, what fires together wires together. And so that means that those neurons line up and become a whole pathway that makes it easier and easier for you to make whatever behavioral change you're wanting to make. And your brain will look different in brain scans, meaning the actual structures will get, some areas will get bigger, some areas will get smaller. So, for example, if you learn how to comfort and soothe yourself, your amygdala, the part of the brain that controls emotional reactivity, will get smaller. And the front of your brain, your prefrontal cortex, which controls our ability to soothe and comfort ourselves, will actually get bigger. It's crazy.
That's
They've done studies on folks who meditate, and their prefrontal cortex is bigger than folks who don't meditate,
I love
simply because of what they are doing in this concept of neuroplasticity, where you can change your brain. So it's very exciting. Just one other quick study
I think
that,
we could talk for hours.
okay, yeah, right, right. But this study just kind of really makes people very excited. They did this study where they attached electrodes to people's to people's heads, and they were doing a brain scan of people actually playing the piano, and then they did brain scans of the same people imagining and visualizing playing the piano. And what they thought was that they were going to see totally different parts of the brain lighting up. But what they found, which was so surprising, is that the same exact parts of the brain lit up just as much when they were actually doing the activity and when they were visualizing and imagining it. And
So
this part of the brain called the cerebellum, it's this huge part of the brain that we don't know a whole lot about, but they used to think it only controlled muscle movement, so like playing the piano. So they thought, okay, well, the cerebellum will only light up when they're actually playing the piano. But it in fact lit up just as much when they were imagining playing the piano. And so that discovery was, you can create muscle memory just from visualizing. You can actually learn how to play the piano by visualizing playing the piano, which is an amazing concept.
this is
Um,
amazing.
yeah, so it's very exciting, because what that means then is that we can use imaginal, nurturing figures to um, to provide the nurturing and care and love and attention to the wounded parts of us that are still there from childhood, that carry the pain of not having been nurtured. And so there are forms of therapy where you bring these parts of the brain, mind together, so that and those are called ego state therapies. And one of them is a pretty popular form of therapy called IFS, and
Which stands
it's
for?
called internal family systems therapy.
Yes.
And so it's basically considering that we all have different parts of our experience. We've got hurt little parts, we've got parts that are angry, we've got parts that are very nurturing, parts that are wise, a part that's protective. So we have different parts of us. And they sort of use this concept in the children's movies Inside Out,
Uh-huh.
that are up for an Oscar right now. That's kind of, they depict the different parts of this little girl in those two movies. And so I think people are beginning to be familiar with this concept that we all have different parts of us, and that we can have those parts interact, or have imaginal parts. Like, for example, you can imagine the best caretaker in the world, who's very nurturing and warm and has a wonderful voice, and what she looks like and feels like and sounds like. And you can, through imagination and using the eye movement that we use in EMDR to strengthen this and grow new neural pathways, bring that nurturing imaginal figure to this wounded part and redo the scene, provide
See,
all of the things that should have been provided, say all the things, hold her in your arms, rock her back and forth, all of the things that form healthy attachments as an infant and child. You can redo that and grow new neural pathways for healthy, secure attachment within yourself.
I love it, Tracy. And
Yeah.
here it is. It's like pulling it all together because you just said
Mhm.
the latest and greatest research shows
Right.
that by visualizing and imagining something, it's just
Right.
as if it's happening in terms
That's it. That's it.
of the function and structure of our brain.
Of the brain. Right.
So,
Yeah.
listen to all this stuff. I think the conclusion is everyone should go see Tracy because
No,
she's amazing. She probably doesn't even have time for all
I
that.
don't, but
But, and you wouldn't believe we're actually at the end of our time on this podcast.
okay. Uh-huh.
I think one of the great things you could leave our listeners with
Mhm.
is those exciting tips on how to
Yes.
really, if this is new to you, all
Right.
these different concepts, EMDR, IFS, different
Right.
ego states, um, imaginal opportunities, neuroplasticity, blah, 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 all the lingo. And you're
Yeah.
like, gosh, I just want to make sure I'm with someone who's going to be best for me and can do the
Yeah.
kind of stuff that Tracy spoke about. What are
Right.
the 3 tips you would give to someone so that they're kind of an empowered consumer
Yeah.
around moving into this exciting and cutting edge way of working with wellness and healing?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's a great question. And I think for people who are looking for therapy and they're interested more in these forms of therapy as opposed to just talking about things, which actually for anybody who's experienced trauma just makes everything worse. So I just want to say that don't do talk therapy if you're a trauma survivor. It just stirs you up, triggers you, and then you leave the session and you've got nothing to do with that or no place to go. So if you ask your therapist, what forms of therapy do you what tends to be your approach? What do you know about brain-based methods of healing? We call that bottom up, meaning that we're trying to work directly with the central nervous system and how it stored trauma as opposed to just talking about something, but actually healing it with one of these brain based methods. So, asking that question, what's your knowledge and training in brain based methods? That would be one.
Okay, so the first question is like, what's your approach to healing?
Right.
How do you work with brain-based methods?
That's
Great.
right. That's right. That's right. Then if they do EMDR, or one of the other brain-based methods, another question would be, do you use this just as a technique, meaning you're just applying it in a kind of a standardized way in a short-term model, or do you use this as a full psychotherapy where you're forming a connection and a relationship to your client? So listening for their approach about that, if they're telling you it's going to be a quick fix of a couple of sessions. That is generally not the case for trauma unless it's a very, very, specific adult, trauma like a car accident or something like that. You really want to look for someone who uses these techniques in a full psychotherapy where they are forming a relationship and a connection and really getting to know you as a whole human being, not just applying a technique to you.
Okay, great. So it's asking if they answer yes, I do use brain-based bottom-up approaches. That's a buzzword, bottom up, right? Which
Right,
you're actually going to process what's being held
right,
in the central nervous system versus just talking about what happened, which is a different part of
right,
the brain. Then the
right.
second question would be something like, in what way are you applying this technique, right? Is it a
Yeah, right,
technique or is it a whole psychotherapeutic approach
right,
where you're actually going to get a more relational experience that incorporates your whole system.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And then I would say the third one is as you're asking about what their approach is and their philosophy, this one's more of like just listen for whether they also talk about wanting to understand your strengths and positive resources. That you already possess and come into therapy with, so that they're looking at you again as a whole person and not just looking at you as a collection of problems, but that you come to therapy with strengths and skills and abilities and resources already that you can use to heal your trauma and to fix your problems and to make new choices. And so you want to be listening for whether they talk about that as well as strengths. It's called sort of a strengths based approach where they're going to see you as a whole person with a lot of coming already with a lot of positive skills.
I love that question. And I think it's
Hmm.
so important. And of course, sometimes when people are coming into therapy, they actually feel broken or they actually feel
Right.
I don't
That's
have
right.
anything to offer. But you and I
That's right.
know that anyone who's been through hard stuff and has figured out how to adapt and survive did so
Right.
by and
Absolutely.
whatever skills they had to
That's
cope
right.
and to get through it. And so I think
That's
that
right.
question sounds super, super important to me because if your therapist isn't connected into that, they're not going to
Right.
be able to leverage all this opportunity that you're already coming to the table with.
That's exactly right. And to use your positive resources for your own healing, which is what's so empowering. And that's really what we're talking about here today, right? Is to feel empowered in the therapy process, that it's your brain, body, mind, soul that's going to do the healing, not the therapist.
Yes. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, Tracy, thank you so
Yeah.
much for sharing all of
Absolutely.
your wisdom today. I know this was I had a great time
I
talking
did too.
to you.
Thank you
I
so
learned
much.
a whole bunch of
Oh,
things.
good,
Now I've
good.
been doing this also for 30 years, and I know that it's going to empower other people. So I want to say to the listeners, thank you so much for joining us on this podcast episode of Whole by Design. I hope it left you feeling as inspired as me to toss out the labels, embrace new perspectives, and take one step closer to the joy and clarity you deserve. As always, visit www.vivapartnership.com to access our free and low cost resources that will empower you and your loved ones on health and healing. Let's spread the message. Subscribe, review, or share the episode with someone who could benefit from a stigma dropping approach to mental fitness today.